Welcome to the Kratom Sobriety Podcast. This is episode 128, and this is Jacob. This evening, I'm chatting with my friend Libby. Libby, how are you?
Hi, Jacob. I will say life is lifing really hard for me right now, so I'm doing the best I can. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine overall, good, I would say, for the most part. I'm sorry, life is lifing. It tends to do that, unfortunately. That is actually a great way to introduce our intro topic for today, actually. Life is lifing, because what we were going to chat about is, would Kratom help? So, life is lifing. Would Kratom help? What I want to kind of get into this is, with the benefit of hindsight and being sober, being off Kratom, I was just thinking about some recent situations that happened. I was working on this somewhat stressful project for a client, and they have a large team of people that I have to work with, and some of them have some very difficult personalities, and one of them was very, very much out of line, like not even like being rude, but just being straight up unprofessional. And it really made me want to like leave and have a drink or take some Kratom or do something. So I was thinking about this as I was having the craving after that situation had ended, and I was leaving the office and just not in a good place, I would say, mentally. I thought a little bit about, like, is there any way that Kratom would help? And I came to the conclusion that the answer to that is an emphatic no. For me, and I think if you found yourself listening to this podcast, this is probably true for you. Once you are in the throes of addiction and understand where Kratom can take you, and also I think once you build a tolerance significant as I had at the end of my usage, there's absolutely no benefit that I could see that would come from taking Kratom. I don't think it would have helped me relieve stress. I think maybe for 5 minutes, and then I would have been so angry at myself for breaking my sobriety just because I was stressed out for a situation. I would have immediately been back in that fight or flight mode, thinking about, okay, how long is this feeling going to last? And then what am I going to do? Because, the way withdrawals were working for me at the end, it was just, a day of usage because I'd relapsed and done it for so long would get me even slightly physically dependent. So I'd immediately be even, thinking about, okay, well, now I'm going to have to deal with at least a hangover from Kratom, maybe even a full blown, bout of some probably mild withdrawal, but it would still suck. And then I just thought about, even if everything could have went beautifully and Kratom was a substance that I could take and, not take again for a month and not be obsessed about it, and it would work wonderfully, I still don't think it would have helped. It wouldn't have changed anything about the situation that just happened. It certainly wouldn't have allowed me to think clearly about a way to deal with that, because that's not that's an ongoing situation and something that has to be dealt with. I can't just ignore it. Someone that's being unprofessional and in a way disrupting a team that you're trying to accomplish a goal with is very much not going to be solved through substance usage. I could go on, but there's just nothing about that scenario. And now there's a common scenario where I definitely would have used Kratom if I was using it. There's nothing that I see at this point that could have been helpful should I have taken Kratom after that. I don't know if you've ever found yourself in a similar space or anything like that.
Oh, no, never, ever, ever. That way.
Might have been a trick question.
JK. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about playing the tape through before, and so that's ultimately what happens when I feel triggered. But I feel triggered often. A specific example would be, I've been being perceived in a way that doesn't feel good to me by my partner's family. So that has been really present for me. And so there's been moments where I'm just so in pain over this, ultimately character defect of mine, that I feel like the only thing to relieve that would be Kratom, or I romanticize this idea of what it would feel like to have a relief like that for just an hour or two. And that's the addict brain, the addiction in the background, I think, that has the mic that's oh, it's one day, one dose, whatever, it's just going to give you a little bit and you'll be fine and you'll be able to walk away from it. And then I think that having been through it all before, you just know that that's like not the way it's going to go. There's no way that you're going to get out of it that easily. You're going to become obsessed and it goes downhill very, very quickly. So yeah, there's a ton of instances that I'm like, I'm tired or I'm bored or I'm triggered or like things aren't feeling good, that I want to escape those feelings, and then being really real with myself about like how quickly you become disenchanted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was like a reflexive response for so long. When you're an addict, it was like, okay, well, I don't know, I'm feeling bad today, take kratom. I had a great day, take kratom. I had this happened. It's just the response to most things when you're addicted to kratom is use more kratom. And now there's no going back, like you just said, right? You can't reset the time clock and undo your addiction and have, undown regulated opioid receptors and all that stuff. It's not possible.
And it's like, you ruined it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you ruined it. Like, there's no way for me to go back to that. I'm sure the moment I did, it would be like maybe a moment of relief, but you would immediately be like you said, like the guilt and the shame, and like it's overwhelming, and you know exactly what you've done.
Yeah.
So how do you enjoy anything anyway?
I don't think you can.
Yeah.
You definitely can't. I can say you definitely can't. I also think it's just not worth it. Like the feeling you can get, even the peak max feeling from kratom, is not worth the risk and the bullshit that comes with it. Mm-hmm. Even just using it recreationally, in my opinion, and for me, it's certainly not. So I can't think of any other scenarios that pop into mind where it could be helpful, because I just don't think there are any.
Yeah.
At least for me, and for anybody probably listening to this.
I agree.
All right. Well, I had the opportunity to talk with Jahred, who is based in Hawaii, and we talked a lot about his experience with kratom and addiction in general. And there's a crazy story in there about a volcano eruption. So I thought it was a fun interview, as fun as an interview about addiction can get. But more importantly, he has a lot of good tips and a lot of good nuggets that I'm sure everybody's going to enjoy. So we'll get you on to that. And thanks for chatting with me, Libby.
Yeah, stay kratom free.
Welcome to the Kratom Sobriety Podcast. This is Jacob, and today on the podcast, I'm here with Jahred. Jahred, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really fabulous.
This morning.
Yeah. Good morning, good afternoon. I didn't catch what time zone you're in, but I'm in Hawaii, so it is morning here.
I'm on the East Coast.
Okay.
Yes, it's afternoon here, so a little bit ahead, but...
All right. Yeah, well, I'm doing good. Thanks for asking. How are you?
I'm doing good too. Thanks for asking as well. So how would you introduce yourself to the audience? Things like your age, where you live, what you do for work, family, anything you want to share?
Yeah, thank you. My name is Jahred. I am 43 years old. I live out in Hawaii, out on the east side of the Big Island, kind of out in the jungle, and which you can hear the birds behind me. I'm a musician. I teach music. I put on events. Used to run a recording studio. So all things music.
That's great. That's really cool. What do you like to do for fun outside of throwing music events and stuff?
Most of my life is pretty music centered. My partner has a couple kids. I like to play with them. I like to hang out at the beach and stuff too, and little this, little that. But music is pretty much, I'm either practicing or playing or recording or writing or something having to do with music most of the day.
That's cool. That's great. All right. Well, we'll do, I guess, what we came here to do. So what is your kratom abstinence date?
I was just looking today. It was December 9th was the last day that I took a dose of kratom.
That's awesome. So a couple months.
Yeah, a couple months.
That's probably got you feeling good.
I'm just like, I'd say the last like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I'm sleeping regular. I'm, somewhat back to normal.
That's great.
Yeah. It was like, there was a while there I was like, am I ever going to just feel just okay, just okay. And now I feel like, I mean, I've had a while with, aside from just normal life stuff, I feel great. I don't really feel too much. I get little restless leg here and there, but aside from that, I'm pretty good.
That's awesome. Yeah. Life is okay sometimes. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes it has its ups and downs. But yeah, man, that's awesome. You're finally on this other side of it, getting kind of back to normal. Before we talk more specifically about like how you first encountered kratom and all that stuff, I'm just curious if you have any history of addiction or substance abuse or anything like that.
I do. And I really am interested to know, like, I listen to a lot of the podcasts and it seems like a lot of people have had past issues with other things, but not everybody. Some people, kratom was the first. I got into things when I was 12. I started smoking weed. When I was 13, I'd pretty much tried everything. And I tried heroin the first time when I was 15.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, by 17, I was like a full-blown addict. And 19, I kicked. So I haven't done heroin since I was 19 or really any of the traditional opiates. And then I'm about getting towards 2 years with no alcohol after a pretty long bout with that.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah. Yeah. So right now, nothing. I don't smoke weed. I don't drink. No kratom. No other drugs. Tobacco and coffee is still a struggle for me. But
That's awesome.
yeah. Really trying to do a sober living if I can.
That's awesome. Well, congrats on getting pretty damn close.
Yeah.
I don't say so myself, so that's really good. Well, when did you first come to encounter kratom? When did you first kind of hear about it and try it and stuff like that?
Yeah. I would say it was about 7 years ago, maybe 7.5 years ago. I started hearing about it out here in Hawaii. One of the smoke shops here, I'd asked him about it and he had warned me. He's like, yeah, I don't do it because when I run out of it, like out in Hawaii, things disappear. My shipment doesn't come in for a few days and they get like really antsy. That was about 7.5 years ago. And then I had a friend who tried it and was just like, oh, this is incredible. And I was not drinking at the time. I was on maybe a few months, no alcohol, and ended up trying it then. So again, yeah, about 7.5 years ago, I'd say.
All right. And when you first tried it, did you like immediately notice anything effects wise? Was it similar to any of your previous experiences? What was that like?
To be perfectly honest, I was like, oh, this is drugs. This is not like drugs. Like I felt like the warm, trigger warning, but like the warm, like opiate tingles that I hadn't experienced since I was 19. And I kind of loved it. Yeah, I kind of loved it.
No, I mean, it's good to be honest, man. You got to be honest. You can't, dance around it. Unfortunately, it is what it is.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I did a good job for a few months, I was just taking it like on a weekend when I played a show or something. I have like social anxiety and usually would drink when I was at a show because I wasn't drinking. And, a lot of times you're playing bars and everybody around you's drinking and it's really challenging. And, kratom was helpful for that. And I was doing pretty good with it for, like I said, a couple of months, maybe 2-3 months. I'd say I only did it once or twice a week.
Yeah, I didn't tell you this at the beginning, but I work in nightlife too on the side. That's not my primary business, but I'm a DJ and I do some promotion and stuff. And yes, I haven't drank in 6 years now. And sometimes I don't get that. I don't really feel that way that much anymore, but it was hard at first for sure.
Yeah, it really can be. And I hear that story a lot. I got a few friends that are musicians who are sober. And I started drinking because when I first really got into it, a lot of like the first gigs all you get is like a couple drink tickets.
Yeah.
None of us drank in the band and we started being like, well, we're all getting paid drink tickets. Let's go to the bar and get something,
Yeah, they hooked you then.
Yeah. It got me and it started with like, oh wow, a half a beer before a show is helpful to kind of cool the nerves. And by the end, it's like had to drink a 6-pack just to feel normal. And
yeah, I know how that goes for sure.
Yeah. Story as old as time.
How did it progress with kratom? So you said you started out and you got to the first while it was like weekends or if you had a show or something. How did it progress from there over the years and to the point where you knew you had a problem with it?
Yeah, so this is where the story gets fun. I live on the most active volcano in the world. The lava is usually yeah. There's a volcano in my story. The lava usually is flowing kind of down the side of the mountain into the ocean. I helped my uncle run an Airbnb where people would come to view it. It kind of has, like you can kind of walk right up to the lava flows.
Oh wow.
It's a tourist attraction and it's beautiful. And it would have been, my kids were graduating in May. So I think it started in the month before that. Our house started shaking every 15 minutes for 3 days straight. And people were warned, there was obviously high alerts going on. And then we got a text that we needed to get out of the house right now. We drove down the street and saw the earth was literally cracking open like 2 blocks away from our house, and the sound of like a jet engine. And I threw the kids in the car. We went back to the house. We had about 15 minutes to pack up is what we could into the 2 cars and get out of there. Civil defense, like, Humvees driving around.
Oh wow.
Not letting us back in the neighborhood. And, first thing, I don't even think I thought about it. I put a spoonful of kratom in my mouth to kind of like get going,
Yeah.
I just kept doing that kind of on autopilot. We were like living out of our car. I had 3 children. I have 3 children. They're in their 20s now. We were here. We couldn't leave the island because they were graduating. One of them high school, one of them junior high. They'd worked really hard for it. So we were here for a couple of weeks, living out of our car, kind of camping out where we could. We would drop the kids off at school, but we were all on notice that we could have to evacuate, in 20 minutes time. So my wife and I would park across the street, and I just kept, I just kept putting a spoonful in my mouth as like a coping mechanism and like energy. And then the end of the night, taking enough to go to sleep. Yeah. It was a crazy time. It was a really crazy time. And that went on until we ended up relocating back to California because it just was too crazy here.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And that went on for a little bit. And then when we finally kind of got into a new house in California, I was, this is like 3 months in, and I was like, okay, I need to stop doing this. And I made it to 11 a.m. and was just in full blown like sweats and withdrawals. And yeah. And again, that was 2018.
2018.
Yeah. So that's how that progressed. And it's funny because, a lot of people who think like they have it under control, and, maybe I would have, but life sometimes throws you craziness, It's like those coping mechanisms become addictions,
Yeah, that's a crazy story. And to, go through that and be in the thick of an addiction, but not even, really comprehending it until you found yourself using it as a coping mechanism to get through the situation, and then going from there. That can be tough for sure.
Yeah. I think I remember feeling like knowing, because I had been warned, I didn't think it was going to be as addictive as it was, but I knew that it was an addictive thing, and I knew that I have addiction issues. But I kept kind of feeling like I'll handle this once things have settled down.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just had no idea how extremely addictive it was. Yeah.
Until it was too late. Yeah.
Until it was, I was in the thick of it. I don't know. I wasn't using a scale, I was just using a spoon. So I don't know exactly how much I was taking at that point, but I ramped up really quick, from a couple times a week to many times a day.
Were you always taking the powder, or did you take any of the extracts or anything like that?
It was only powder for quite a while until it got to the point where then to do a show, to get the effect that I was hoping for of like kind of calming my social anxiety and maybe getting a little energy boost, I would have to take like a one of the shots and the powder. It's like I would take what I was regularly taking, but then it's like, okay, now I'm wanting to actually get something from it. And yeah, I would have to take one of the shots as well.
I know exactly what you mean. It ramps up to the point where you need that little boost to even feel anything, because anything else is just normalcy.
Yeah, for sure. I'd say the last 3 to 4 years, I wasn't getting anything noticeable from taking the powder. It's just if I didn't take it, I was sick as a dog. Couldn't work, couldn't really function. But I couldn't, no matter how much I took, it didn't give me any type of high or buzz or noticeable enjoyment really at all.
Yeah. You first found yourself super dependent in 2018. You just were finally able to break free in December of last year, so 2024. That's 6 years. That's a long time, man. Did you try to quit during that time period? Did you have any successful quits? Did you did your usage go down or go up? How did that look?
Yeah, I think it slowly just went up. A couple of times I tried to taper or curb it. I also, in that period of time, I was going through extreme depression. I loved living in Hawaii, and now I was living in Sacramento. We went through the pandemic.
Oh, shit. Yeah.
My wife of 23 years and I started going through the beginnings of what ended up being a divorce.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so it really just kept becoming a problem for tomorrow's me. Like I just kept thinking, I don't have.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going through like suicidal level depression, and anytime I would even slow down on kratom use, I would start drinking again, and it was just this spiral. It was rough.
Yeah, man, I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's all part of making us who we are and making us stronger in the end. But yeah, it was a really rough time for sure. I think also the pandemic shutting down all music. So it was like my outlet.
Oh, yeah.
My outlet, my job, just everything. Everything was like in this shift. And I just kind of just went into this kind of like autopilot mode of taking kratom and then feeling like if I didn't, if I even skipped a dose by a couple of hours, I would start having some pretty big issues. And yeah, it was pretty terrible.
Yeah, it gets to that point where it feels like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. You can't not take it because you'll be, like you said, sick as a dog. But like you taking it just makes everything worse at that point. It doesn't make anything any better. So how did you finally break out of that and get finally free in December of last year? What happened? How did you finally get to that point?
Well, my wife and I did officially split. After a couple of months, I came back here to Hawaii by myself, still taking it. I was keeping like a half a kilo bag with me at all times. I was using a business card, not even a spoon at that point, and just literally like scooping huge scoops. Almost like between every activity, like I just was at this point of just like kind of spooning it into my mouth just so that I wouldn't have the risk of, being somewhere and starting to get sick,
Yeah, I know.
And then I met a woman here and started dating. And after a couple of weeks, she asked me about it. And I had to just kind of come clean. She's like, what's this green powder? I see you like popping in your mouth all day.
What's green powder everywhere that you're always taking? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was all over my car because I'm spilling it. It's like, it's all over like this dust on my clothes. I'm like, putting it in my mouth and then looking for water. So I'm sitting there mumbling like, where's my water? It was just a mess. And then meanwhile, like not, like it's not like I'm getting high or like I can even defend it at this point. Like I'm not like, oh, this helps me with my anxiety. It's like, if I don't take this, I am a shit show. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
No, you can. It's totally fine.
Thank you. Yeah. And then she's really amazing. She found the podcast. I think she went on Reddit. She just went on her own volition and started researching. So she looked on Reddit. She was reading through some of that stuff. She found the podcast. She found some tapering schedules that she'd seen online, found the list of supplements. I mean, she is an angel. I'm still with her today.
Oh, wow.
Absolute angel. I do not think I could have done it without her, especially in the state that I was in. I mean, maybe eventually, but together, she got me, like we created a schedule, which at the beginning was actually way too fast. Picked a date, got a digital scale. I think that was June. So it was like June to December. I did this long, slow taper.
Oh, wow.
It was way too fast. When I started measuring, I think psychosomatically, especially because I was doing it with her, like the idea was to just measure exactly what you're taking without taking any less, just to see where you're at. And I was at 42 grams a day roughly. But when I stayed at 42, I started having withdrawal. So I think I psychosomatically was like, like when I'm writing down how much I'm taking, I was actually taking less than I would have been normally taking.
Yeah, didn't want to show someone else how much you were actually taking, and bringing it a little bit lower and getting to the lowest point possible as your entry point.
Yeah, exactly. So starting at 42 grams, we started noticing some issues already, some sleep irregularity, some restless legs, some random sweating, things like that. And then we just kept it there for a little while until I started to level out. And then the schedule we had read was to drop it in half, which I wouldn't. Yeah. So I did. I dropped it down to.
Yeah, that's pretty rough. Yeah.
Yeah. Dropped it to 20. And what's weird is I dropped it to 20 and felt like I had some issues, but it wasn't that bad.
Oh, okay.
And then we started dropping a gram a day and got to 16, something like that. And it all caught up with me like I had been hit by a train. I cannot emphasize how horrid. I'd say 3-4 days. I just stayed at that number because I was really trying not to go up. I think I even did go up at one point, just a little bit. Like I just was like, I'm dying. It was absolutely horrid. From there, eventually leveled out and then did this long, drawn out 0.5 gram a week, sometimes waiting 10 days to drop again. Every time I dropped, I would feel it. About 3 days later, I would have, 2 days or so of just horridness. The whole experience, I barely slept for the 6 months. It was like it would just start kind of leveling out, and then I would take it again, drop it again. And then finally went cold turkey on that date that I said, December 9th, went cold turkey with the help of a doctor from, I think, 9 grams a day.
Okay.
Something like that, 9, maybe 10 grams a day. I have it written down somewhere.
That's awesome. That takes a lot of willpower to taper like that. And yeah, glad you were able to see a doctor at the end and hopefully get some help to get through the last of it. Because that's probably, not being able to sleep and having restless legs and all that for a long drawn out period of time, that can be torture.
Yeah, it really was. And I'm really proud of myself, and I'm so grateful for her that the first month she weighed out my doses for me. And then I was like, babe, I need to do this for me, and I'll just be completely transparent. And if I ever mess up or take more than I'm supposed to, I will let you know. But I did it. Every single time it's like weighing 2.7 grams when you know that, 3.5 grams, you'd actually feel good, and 5 grams, you might feel great.
Yeah.
But just sticking to that. I said I would do 2.7, 5 times a day. So that's what I'm doing.
Takes a ton of willpower, yeah, and that's what you said there is like super powerful too. Like I had to do it for me. Yeah, she kudos for her. Yeah, you found a really good partner that would do all that for you and helped you kind of get where you needed to get to. But then taking that reins for yourself and saying like, I got to do this for me, and that's how it's going to go. And I'll tell you if I screw up, and I'll be transparent and being accountable. That's how you start to recover for sure.
Yeah. I think it's a crucial part of it. I think I can understand why tapering isn't for everybody. I'm not one that has a lot of willpower around substances at all. So I'm kind of amazed with myself that I was able to do it. But in the end, it's also like, it's been so like it started just having a negative context with Kratom. Like there was no time when I was taking it and feeling better. It was always like I take it and then I look at the clock around like 45 minutes later, and I would start to be like, okay, actually I've settled in a little bit. My restless leg is gone. I can maybe get something done for a little bit. And then maybe 2 hours later would start back up again. And like clockwork, my body would know like it's dose time. Like I was like every 5 hours I was taking one roughly. And so it would be, I'm supposed to take one at noon, and by 11:30 I'm getting sweats, and 11:45 it's getting rough, and 11:55 I'm like counting down the seconds, and then I take it at 12, but it's not enough to like have that instant relief that you have when you take what your body is wanting.
Yeah.
So it's just this long drawn out period of just like, this stuff sucks. Like this is just this horrible roller coaster of of terribleness.
Yeah, you're almost in a way like retraining your brain to go from like this is a substance that I liked or had some sort of value to me to like this is horrid and I don't want any of any of it around me ever again.
Yeah. There's like things that I didn't know. One of them was like the bigger drops at the beginning, something about like your opiate receptors get oversaturated. And so going from 40 to 20 can be not as hard as going from 15 to 12 grams per day. You know what I mean? And I was reading up on it. The other one was like that there's a big delay. So when I was doing the dropping a half a gram a day, it didn't catch up with me usually for 2 or 3 days. So I wonder with a lot of the people who are, oh, I take a day off here and there or whatever. And it's like, well, take 3 days off, take 4 days off, take a week off, like see how you feel. Because I think it, especially when you're taking the powder, it's like it's so everywhere in your system that your body doesn't really start going into those withdrawals till it's worked through what's already there.
Yeah, totally. And it, like you said, it builds up. And after a while, it takes a while to get out of your system. For me, it felt like after a few hours, I would be really sick or waking up in the middle of the night. And then other times, I would quit and it wouldn't be that bad. I think there's both a physical and a mental part of it. Well, there's definitely a mental part of it too, but sometimes you can suck yourself out worse and all that stuff. So
absolutely. And it's a different animal. And then even the difference between like you don't take it and you're sweating and you start having some physical response. When I said felt like I got hit by a train. And then the last cold turkey, maybe 5-6 days where like every bone in my body felt like it was breaking. I mean, it wasn't like, oh, I have sweats and restless leg, but I'm going to get to work. It was like, I feel like I'm being run over by a train repeatedly for just, hours and hours and hours and hours on end,
It just hurts to exist.
Yeah, it just hurts to just even exist. The depression, I mean, God, I could go on and on. Like I try to remind myself regularly just of how horrid it was. And for me, it was worse than heroin, than kicking heroin.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, and I've heard that from other people. And then I've also heard from people, I think it really depends on the length of time you're doing it and the amounts you're doing, of course.
Oh, definitely.
But my personal experience when I kicked heroin versus my personal experience when I kicked kratom was way worse, way trickier. And then you also have everywhere you go, there's huge blinking signs, kratom. You go to the gas station, they're selling shots, So at least heroin, I was able to kind of distance myself from it.
Yeah, with heroin or drugs, you can delete your dealer's number, and it's not always that easy to meet a new dealer. With kratom, usually, like you said, you could buy it wherever you want. All right. Well, you mentioned that when you went cold turkey, you saw a doctor. Was there anything in particular that really helped you with your withdrawals when you jumped off at the end, or anything you did otherwise that helped?
Absolutely. Luckily, I met with a doctor here that was covered by my insurance, and she was very familiar with kratom, and she trusted me. She had me drug test and stuff to make sure that, I was good. Trusted me to like basically prescribe me everything that I wanted with the promise that I'm only going to take what I need. So we looked together for the list, and my girlfriend had also made a list, and listening to the podcast, we'd come up with a list, and here's a list of everything that we've heard can help. And aside from things where she was like, okay, this has contraindication, like where it was specifically things like, oh, you can't take this, and
conflicting information.
Yeah. She gave me quite a few things. I did a clonidine patch. I didn't really realize was helping until I took it off weeks later. I was like putting one on every week. It was like a 7-day patch. I didn't think it was even doing anything, but I took one off and then went out and actually had to like call my girlfriend and be like, oh my God, I'm having a panic attack. So it was helping. The gabapentin, which I started on 300 milligram pills, only taking them at night, taking 2 of them. So 600 milligrams a night. And then the other thing was Valium. For that first while, I was taking, I don't know the milligrams, but I was taking 2 Valium. So 2 Valium and 2 gabapentin to get to sleep, which was kind of scary because I have a lot of addiction issues. Kind of scary because I just didn't want to sub one thing for the other, but also I don't think I could have done the cold turkey part without that. And then I pretty quickly, I got her to then prescribe me 100 milligram GABAs and switch to like very quickly, like going from the 600 milligram to the 300 milligram and then very quickly down to like 200 milligram. And the Valium, I did the same thing. After about 4 or 5 days, rather than taking 2, I took 1.5 and then just 1 and then just a half and then got those done too. So I didn't even finish the bottle of any of those things.
Yeah, that's awesome that, a lot of doctors don't even know about kratom, so it can be hard to even get treatment, but too that you were able to, and you were able to get the right mix of meds. And yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Way to do it. You don't want to end up with a benzo habit after getting off kratom, that's for sure. So yeah, real good job.
Yeah, and the first night, I can't remember what she had given me like a very common sleeping aid and said, try this first. And I could not sleep and I could not function. Like it was hard to get up to go pee or whatever. And I'm like stumbling and just in the worst pain ever. And then couldn't take anything else because you couldn't take the two things together. Not a blink of sleep, can't lay down, can't get up. It was a horrid experience. And then when I finally did take the other stuff, I mean, I slept not through the night, but maybe 4 hours or something, and just was like, wow, like I don't think I could have done it without that. Huge props to anyone who pulls it off.
That's great, man. I'm glad that all worked out for you. Now that you're on the other side of it, what were the first 30 and then what was it like at 30 days and then what was it like at 60 days?
Yeah, wow. I did the first 30 days or so, I did one of the meetings every day. I'm in that Signal chat, which has been amazing.
Awesome.
And I listen to the podcast regularly. I had I had a couple, 2 or 3 distinct pink clouds, which were kind of like beautiful. I mean, I'd drive in my car and I'd put on music and I would be like crying about how beautiful it sounded. Aside from those, it was a lot of depression, a lot of sleepless nights. I ended up not sleeping with my partner because it was like I was just up and back and up and back. And she has a toddler that is in a bed near us. And it was like, it could be 4 or 5 hours where I like lay down for 20 minutes trying to sleep and the restless leg, I'm just kicking and kicking and kicking. And so I get back up and I try it again. And like out here in Hawaii, there's this rain that comes in where you can see it coming in off the ocean. And you go from a beautiful sunny day to like instantaneously you're in a full blown downpour. And the depression would come in like that. Like I would get up, I'd be doing okay. And I could feel it like tingling, like it's coming. And it would just wash over me. The most insane, deep, dark, I don't want to move. I want to die. And then, and I would just, I was also doing regular therapy. I would just sit with it. I would just sit with it and just be like, rather like all my life I've reached for something. Like, okay, I don't feel good. I'm going to drink. I don't feel good. I'm going to smoke a joint. I don't feel good. I'm going to take a bunch of kratom. I just would sit there and just feel. I actually have a teddy bear. I squish the teddy bear and just feel like shit. And then it would pass, couple hours usually. Some of the days it lasted most of the day. Again, having an amazing partner. I mean, I could tell her like, I feel sad. I feel horrible. And she'd be like, that's okay. I'm like, no, it's not okay. It sucks. She's like, that's okay too. Yeah. And those first 30 days, lots of that. I did a speaker meeting on day 30, which was cool. I got to record my story. And then day 30 to 60, it started getting better. I think by day 30 or day 40, I had completely gotten rid of any pharmaceuticals. Just really trying to make sure, again, that I don't end up with a benzo habit. My mom was a terrible pill addict, and I'm very nervous about stuff like that. And so, so no pharmaceuticals at all. Sleep was sketchy, but it started evening out day 45, day 50. And like I think I said at the beginning, like these last few weeks, kind of like, I'm feeling better. I feel mostly like myself. I dare say I even feel good.
That's awesome. Yeah. It takes a little while to get, back to baseline, particularly after, using for so long and then having it become so much of a daily habit, and then to be able to quit and then get past the acute period and then adjust into what life looks like after this. But yeah, it looks like you're doing all the good things. You got a sounds like a good support system with a partner and meetings and in a couple chats. Anything else you do for recovery or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a therapist who's actually an addiction specialist that I do once a week. I got a couple really great friends that I feel like I can confide, anything. I play chess online with some of the guys from the chat so that even if I'm like not active in the chat, just seeing like, oh, they moved, we might do one or two moves a day, but it just reminds me like that I'm in this community. So even if I'm not connected with them, music, of course, is super healing and helpful. Trying to start working on building healthier habits and, exercise. I mean, kind of at the beginning when people would say, you need to exercise, I'm like, bro, I can't even get up. Like, what you talking about exercise? Like, I can't even move,
Yeah.
But now I'm like, okay, I can start doing those things. I can make sure to start being active, making veggie juice every morning, trying to do some cleansing and really trying to look at what the traumas and things that have driven me to use in the past. I mean, a big one is like, I don't know how to like process sadness. People be like, you got to feel it. And I'm like, A, I don't want to. And B, like, what do you mean? Just like learning how to just be with it and just like, I don't always feel great. Some days I feel sad. Some days I feel, anxious. That's okay. And that's kind of the big stuff that I'm working on these days is just being okay with not being okay, I guess.
Yeah, it takes a long time to get there. I think it took me a long time to get there, at least. And I can't even say that I'm 100% always, I still find myself wondering, why today can't be better or why this didn't work out this way. It's like dwelling on those things never gets you anywhere good usually.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that's cool. You got a lot of good growth things you're doing, which is awesome to hear.
Someone in one of the chats said they had to come to terms with like that kratom wasn't causing their depression and their anger issues. And then someone replied like, no, but by getting kratom out of the way, now you can start to find what is causing those things. That's been really ringing true for me is that like I had horrible depression and anxiety on kratom. I have horrible depression and anxiety off of kratom, but off of it, I'm having the ability to like look at it and digest it and talk it over with a therapist and rather like that first instinct where you're like, oh, I feel sad or upset and you reach for something when that thing's no longer there, you kind of have to go, okay, why do I feel sad and upset? And maybe there's other coping mechanisms, or maybe it's just okay that sometimes in my life I feel sad and upset.
You're dealing with it versus trying to escape it, which is the big difference, I think. And that's something that you can't do when you're not sober because your escape is not being sober. But when you're sober, you can work through those things and learn how to deal with them in a healthy way, which is much better than reaching for a substance.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think so. And I mean, I think when I digested that, like from the first time I smoked weed, which again was 12, and I pretty much started smoking weed every day at that point, till my last dose of kratom, which was at 43 years old. That's 31 years of being buzzed. Am I doing the math right? Yeah, it was a long time.
Yeah, that's 31 years. Yeah. A long time, man.
There was a few months before the eruption, before I got into kratom, where I was not drinking, not smoking weed, meditating daily. And when I was telling my story in the speaker meeting, and then I had said 30 years of being buzzed from one thing or another. And then I realized that, oh, actually there was a few months that weren't, and they were actually really beautiful. Then there was an eruption, and then there was kratom and whatever else. But yeah, for me anyway, I have tended to, like when I was on heroin, I had stopped smoking weed. In the process of kicking heroin, started smoking weed again, copious amounts. And then it became the new thing, just smoking weed from morning till night.
Yeah.
Which is better than heroin. I mean, yeah, if you're a heroin addict and you can switch to weed, kudos. Like that's a great thing. But spending your entire life smoking weed as a way to deal with all your problems is not sustainable either, in my opinion.
Yeah, in my opinion, it isn't either. But everybody has their own ways, and like you said, harm reduction is definitely a good strategy for someone that's using fentanyl or heroin or something. All right, well, a couple more things, and then we'll probably wrap up here today. So, if someone was gonna ask you what your top tip is to quit kratom, what would your top tip be?
I think that if you can taper, and if you can do it with somebody, it doesn't have to be a partner, but it could be a best friend, just like an accountability buddy, I would say. Somebody that you're like reporting to every day, that you have to tell them if you messed up, or in meetings or something. Like, I think that tapering for me was extremely helpful for even just my own self-confidence, my own self-control. And I think that if you did it slow enough, you could potentially get away without having too horrid of an experience. But I also think everybody's got to find their own way. I think having support, I think meetings, really important too. I think you said one tip, but yeah, there's a few, and I do think that talking with a doctor and getting some meds if needed, pretty crucial as well.
Those are all really good things. Will definitely help you on your way to quitting this type of habit and getting your life back. And you don't have to do them all at once. But yeah, those are really good resources for sure.
I would think even if somebody's listening to this and you're like not ready to quit right now, or you're not sure or whatever, like if you can get a digital scale and find out where you're at, like really just start keeping track of where you're at and try not to go up. Even if you're not ready to go like lower the number. I just feel like so many of us, it's like we're just taking a little more every month or every week or whatever. So wherever you're at, you've been taking it a year or 3 years or 7 years or whatever, like just finding out how much you're taking and starting the process of I'm not going to take more than X amount, I think is like at the very least a great place for people to start.
Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah, starting somewhere, starting small if you're not ready to fully commit, and at least figuring out where you are is a good place to get an inventory. But if you found yourself here, you probably know it's time to quit.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I think tapering and jumping from there, at least knowing what your starting point is important. All right. Well, since you're a musician, you probably have been to a lot of events. If you had to pick like your coolest concert or event, like what's your like top one?
Oh, yeah. I went to a Grateful Dead show with Jerry Garcia when I was 14, and it was a life-changing experience. And Grateful Dead are kind of like most people either love them or hate them, but they changed my life. Right after Jerry died, I went on Other One's tour. Yeah, so I'm big into the Dead, and I've gone to a ton of other shows I like, but yeah, definitely the Dead.
Oh, that's awesome. Man, Charlie would have. You guys could have talked all about it. He's a big Dead guy.
All right.
That's cool though. I think I went to like Further Fest back in the late '90s with a couple of like the members of the Dead. I don't mind a Dead tune here or there.
Yeah, no, that's the way. I got a lot of friends who, like I said, people tend to love it or hate it, or then there's people who are like, yeah, I can get down with this one and that one, and I think it's the experience, the whole experience of especially back early on with, the actual Dead shows and the family, the kind of community. Before that, the only show I'd been to was a Green Day show, which was just like a concert. Like you go to the concert, you watch the music, you dance, you leave. The Dead was like you show up and there's this whole city and a lot of people selling tie-dyes and burritos and every kind of thing. And like there was a kind of inclusion and kindness and camaraderie that I've never experienced anywhere else.
Yeah, the camaraderie, that's what it's all about right there for sure. That's cool. Well, I guess before we wrap up, is there an answer to a question that maybe I didn't ask you or anything else you'd like to share with the audience?
I can't necessarily think of any. Fuck kratom. I can get there you go, right? That's a good ender. I can get with the idea that like if somebody is on a heavy opiate like fentanyl and they want to use kratom to get off of that, I can support that. I wouldn't personally advocate that kratom just be banned, partially because bans don't work. Get off of it. Get off of kratom. Get off of it. Like, if you know somebody on it, like get them to start listening to podcasts. Like, it was a horrible experience. It was a really, 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 really horrible experience. And I just highly recommend like people just stay away from it. I'm just big on fuck kratom. It is not it is way worse than it is a good thing for the vast majority of us.
I totally agree. I think it's like it's still masquerading as something that it's not. And what I mean by that is I'm with you. I don't think you should ban anything because it doesn't work. But I think there's this notion that it's a lot less harmful than it actually is. And I think that should just be more transparent. And then, yeah, if you found yourself listening to this podcast, or if you're not taking it, but you have a loved one that's taking it and you're listening to this podcast, or if you're just taking it every day and you don't think it's a problem, I have news for you. You're probably dependent on it and it's going to suck when you try to stop. But anyway, like I think you're much better off not on it than on it, but you're more than welcome to make your own decision about that.
Yeah, absolutely. To each their own. And I made the mistake of like at day 40, I posted on my Facebook wall something like, in case anyone was wondering, kratom sucks. The litany of like the amount of people that commented that were like, oh, I know I went through an addiction, people that I didn't know. And then the people that would get on there and be like, it's great. I take it every day and it's not a problem and this and that. And really, a lot of people, I believe, in denial. Maybe it affects us differently. Maybe if you've never had an opiate addiction or something. One thing I will say, too, is when I first went through the divorce, I went and stayed at a friend's house in Nevada City and we got snowed in, and he had some other people who lived on the property. And one of them I didn't know was taking kratom. He came and knocked on my door and he said, do you happen to have any kratom? And I said, yeah, I got a little bit, but we're snowed in. He goes, I couldn't get to the post office to pick up my package and I'm out and I'm going through withdrawal. And we had this like experience of like, oh man, we're snowed in together and I got like, maybe 3 ounces left. And this is going to be a problem, It's just scary stuff.
Yeah.
It's scary. It's not like, when you run out of tobacco and like, or coffee, like all these other things where like, yeah, it sucks, or even weed, like, it sucks when you run out of weed.
Yeah.
But you're not like going through, train wrecking withdrawals.
Yeah, if you forget your bag of weed for your trip to the mountains and you accidentally get snowed in for a couple of days, you'll be fine. Like you just won't be able to smoke weed for a couple of days. Yeah. Like nothing will happen.
Yeah,
Well, maybe I don't want to minimize that. Maybe for some people they do experience some withdrawal and discomfort, but for me, nothing would ever happen. Yeah, I agree. It's not something to be trifled with.
Yeah.
Jahred, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We really appreciate it. Really awesome to hear about your story. Crazy with the volcano and everything you've been through. And I'm so glad that you're on the other side of it now. And yeah, man, just thanks again. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. This podcast was a lifesaver. I think there's a sense of shame and like loneliness in kratom addiction. And I think the more podcasts and the more people talking about it and the more it comes out into the light, because there's so many people that are going through this, and it really helped listening to people's stories and just being like, okay, I'm not alone. Like I'm not just like some random dumbass who got hooked on some random plant, and I'm not imagining things, like people would kind of tell me like it, like act like it's like coffee, and it's like, I'm like, no, I'm having heroin withdrawal. This isn't coffee, So hearing people's stories was so incredible. So I'm really grateful to you and to Charlie and everybody. Super good works you guys are doing.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah. It can be lonely and isolating for sure. We want to make sure there's an outlet so people have the option to recover and find a way out of it.
Yeah.
Thanks again, man. I'll let you go, but have a great night. And thanks everybody for listening.
Yeah, you too. And thanks everyone for listening.
Bye now.